Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Thursday lecture. My name is Yana Ocharenko, and I am an outreach coordinator here at Education USA Ukraine. Education USA is a global network. Education USA is your official source on higher education in the United States. And all products, all lectures, all resources we provide to you are absolutely free. So you can easily reach out to us via social media or via our email, or you can just Google, and Google Education USA Ukraine, and you will easily find our web page with all information, with all announcements. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us, because we are here for you. We are really happy and excited to assist you on your educational journey to the United States. Our today's topic is college interview essentials. I know that sometimes interview might be optional, but I would highly recommend you do not miss this opportunity and registers for interviews, because they offer you a great chance to showcase your personality, to demonstrate your values, and to prove that your interests, your values aligned with the institutions you have chosen. So today we are going to provide you with different advice that can help you shine and feel confident during your interview. And we have an outstanding guest speaker, Mike, who will share his experience and his insights on this topic. So, Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. So I'm an international recruiter at Nova Southeastern University, which is a medium-sized university located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So I'll cover a little bit about the university first, just to give you an idea, and then we'll get into the topic. If any of you want to learn more about NSU or to get any information, here's my email address. You can feel free to reach out to me, or you can grab the QR code. And there's a lot of detailed information about the university, so you could look more about the university. But just to give you an idea, I know our topic is about admissions interviews, but I think it's important to kind of give you a framework from my background, because there are about 5,000 universities in the U.S. And as Yana mentioned, there might be many different kinds of options for interviews. So some universities will not require an interview for admission. Full disclosure, NSU does not require an interview. Other universities will require that. And then other universities will, as Yana mentioned, give you the option. And I've worked at universities that give you the option, and I've done many admissions interviews. So I've learned a few tips or tricks that I hope will help you walk away from this feeling more confident, because I know it's very intimidating to do an admissions interview, but I don't think it has to be. And I think if you understand a bit more about why interviews are going on and what that means for you, hopefully you won't be so intimidated by it. But just to give you a bit of idea of what kind of university NSU is, because again, out of all those options in the US, there are all kinds of different universities. Some will have under 1,000 students, some will have 60,000 students. I mean, we're somewhere there in the middle. I think we have around 20,000 total students on campus, but 6,600 are undergraduate, meaning they come right from high school. So you'll have small classes. Your average class size will be 17 students. Again, some universities, like the university I went to, had under 1,000 students, and my class size was about 8. So it's very small. But when I got my master's degree, I think that university had about 40,000 students, and I saw classes where there were 120 students in the class. So, every university is a little different in the way they go about things. And we have a diverse university. We have students from every state in the U.S. and over 115 different countries. So we do have students from all over the world, and we are a research institution. So there are a lot of ongoing research projects, which is great for those of you interested in sciences in particular. So that's just to give you a little bit of a background. So we'll get into the topic here about admissions interviews. So again, my goal for this presentation is just that you walk away feeling confident, that you're not scared. I know that whether it's an admissions interview, whether it's a job interview, whether it's going on a date with somebody, which is kind of like an interview, it can be very nerve-wracking. It will make you very, very nervous. And I don't think it has to be that way. So before you even think about the interview process and what you need to do in the interview, I think it's good to kind of think a little bit about why do universities interview students? What can an interview mean for you? Because again, some universities are going to require you to interview and you have to do that. Others, it's going to be your option. I think especially as a teenager, our instinct, if it's optional, is to say, I don't want to do it. I think that would be a mistake because like Yana said, that's an opportunity for you to really let yourself shine. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'll give you some steps before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview that can, help you have success. I don't think any of these things are going to be groundbreaking or like crazy stuff that you aren't aware of. But I think it's really important that you hear it from somebody who's been on both sides. I've been a student who's had to sit there and do interviews with universities, and I've been an admissions officer doing interviews. So I've learned a lot of little things that I hope can help you out. So I think the first thing to look at is, why do universities interview students? And I think, that's obvious. They want to get to know you, because when you're applying for universities, if any of you who had started that process, it's a little bit dry. It's a little bit boring. I mean, you're applying on a website, you're sending in documents that don't really tell anything about you as a person. They're just numbers. So you might have a GPA. That's just a number. That doesn't really say anything about you. It might be your SAT score. That's a number. I mean, those things are important. I'm not saying they're not, but they don't really indicate who any of us are. All of us are going to be more than our GPA. All of us are going to be more than our SAT. So this is really, the interview is a chance for you to show you're a real person, to make yourself three-dimensional, to show aspects of your personality that maybe don't come across in those numbers, the SAT, the GPA, things like your TOEFL score, whatever it might be. That's one aspect of us, but it's not everything. And those are indicators that will show that you might be successful at a university. But there are indicators in our personality that will show that you can be successful, but they're not going to come across in a score. So this is really your opportunity to kind of show who you are. And that's why universities are interviewing you. They want to get to know you. They want to see those different aspects of you. They want to see if maybe there's a part of you that doesn't show up on paper in the application that will show that you're going to be a good student. They're also going to look at maturity. I think that's a big thing that students want to look at. They want to make sure that you're ready for university. They don't want to put you in a situation where you're going to fail. Universities want you to succeed. They want you to come and have a good experience. So I think that's another thing they'll be looking for as well is, do you seem mature? Do you seem like you're ready for college? College is quite a bit different from high school. You're going to have much more free time. The academic expectations, I don't care what high school you've gone to in the world. If you're going to university, the academic expectations will be higher than they were in high school. And you're going to have a lot of free time. If you're in high school, you might go to school from 7:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. and everything is very regimented. University is not like that. In university, you can make your own schedule. You might have classes only on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That sounds great, but that means you have 5 days a week with nothing. And if you're not very disciplined and mature, that can cause an issue. So they're going to be looking at that as well. The other thing that universities want to look at is to make sure that you're a good fit. I'm sure you've all heard talk about, when you're looking at universities and deciding which one to select, find one that's a good fit for you. People always say you should visit the university so you can see where you fit in. Universities are doing the same thing. They want to make sure that you as a student is a good fit. A university is like a country in a lot of ways, that each university has its own culture. And so they're going to want to make sure you fit in with their culture. So if it's a university that is, students study a lot, there's not a lot of partying going on. It's a lot of studying. One of the things an admissions officer might be looking at is, is that what you want from your university experience? Do you want to go to a university where there's not going to be a lot of partying going on, but there's going to be a lot of, you're going to need to study very hard? Those are things that they're going to look at. They want to make sure that you're a good fit, that if they select you to come to the university, that you're going to match in very well. And ultimately, I think, universities are interviewing you because they want you to succeed. They want students who are going to do well. They don't want you to come to the university and come for a year and realize you don't feel at home there and you want to transfer out, that you fail academically because you weren't ready. And so, there's two reasons for that. One, they don't want you to pay tens of thousands of dollars and then have to fail out and, you've lost money, you've lost years of your life, but also I know all of you are aware of university rankings. One of the aspects of a university ranking is something called retention. And retention is if a student comes as a freshman, do they finish in 4 years and graduate from that university? And so the higher the retention is, so the more students that finish, that's a good indicator. That helps the university get a better ranking. So they're self-interested as well. They don't want to select you to come to the university and put you in a position where you fail because you're going to go into debt or spend a lot of money and years of your life and not get the degree, but it also makes them look bad. So, that's kind of why they're looking at interviewing you. And then again, what does interview mean for you? We kind of talked about that a little bit. It's a chance for you to make yourself a living, breathing, three-dimensional person, show those aspects of yourself that don't come across on paper. I think it's also a great chance, particularly for those interviews where it's optional, for you to demonstrate interest. So, for example, if a university gives you the option to interview or not, by you saying, yes, I'd like to interview, that's showing you're really interested in that university. And universities get a lot of applicants. And so there's limited time that a university can spend on each applicant. So one thing that a university will look at in terms of which students should we spend the most time with, one of those factors is who seems interested. And there are several ways you can show interest. One could be, and this sounds a little creepy, but if you click on an email from the university, they're going to see that you're clicking on their emails. They're going to see that you're clicking on the links. That's showing that you're interested. Hey, the student's opening the emails that we sent them. They're clicking on the links. They're engaging. Another thing they might look at is they want to interview with us, even though it was optional. Even if it's not optional, you can really show your interest during that interview if you've done research about the university. If you come into that interview and you're very well prepared, you know a lot of really detailed information about the university, you're clearly showing you're interested. And for an admissions officer, that really stands out. If I have a student who is responding to my emails or who chooses to interview, or even, we don't do admissions interviews, but we offer time where if students want to come to meet with us to answer questions, they can do so. Not many students want to do that, but if a student says, yeah, I'd like to schedule a Zoom with you, I know that student's more interested. I'm going to spend more time and more focus on that particular student. So it really is an opportunity for you to kind of stand out from the rest of the pack. If there are 5,000 applicants and only, let's say 300 choose to do interviews and you're one of those 300, obviously you're going to get more attention. I also think it's a chance for you to form a relationship with your admissions officer, which I think is really important. Again, admissions officers are going to be dealing with hundreds, if not thousands of applicants. For myself, I deal with probably over 2,000 applicants every year. So you can imagine, I don't know most of those applicants personally. So if a student, again, is responding to emails, is choosing to speak with me, does schedule a Zoom, I'm going to remember that student, and particularly ones who you get to know your admissions officer a little bit, because it's the same for you all. You've applied to multiple universities. You're getting emails from the universities, from admissions officers, but we're really nothing more than names in an email. So if you can get to know that person, it's like anything in life. If you know somebody, if you formed a relationship, you're going to get a little bit better treatment. And I mean, some examples of ways that could help you to have a relationship with your admissions officer is, let's say you are between a $12,000 and a $14,000 per year scholarship, and you formed a relationship with your admissions counselor, and they're looking at your application and say, this student is right on the borderline. What scholarship? Should I give him the $12,000 or should I give him the $14,000? If you form that relationship, if you've been responsive, more likely than not, they're going to say, you know what, this student has always replied. This student chose to interview with me, or when they did the interview, they were really excellent. I'm going to give them the higher scholarship. So I think that's really important. I think the other aspect of it is it's a chance for you to get to know the school, particularly you all are from another country. It's not so easy for you to come visit U.S. campuses. So this is a little chance for you to get to meet somebody kind of in person from the school, which is going to give you an idea. Again, we're talking about fit. You want to find the best fit for you. And if you can't visit campus, one of the ways to find fit is to interact with people from that university. And those interviews will give you a little chance to get a feel for the university. How does that admissions officer treat you in the interview? What kind of questions are they asking you? That's going to really give you some insight into the university. And if you're doing multiple interviews, you'll kind of start to see where you feel a bit more comfortable. So I think some things to remember with the the interview process that's really important. The first one, I think this is super important. Again, these interviews are very stressful, but I think if you keep these little tidbits in mind, it won't be as stressful. So the first thing is universities want you as much as you want them. I know oftentimes when we go into an interview, whether, again, this could be a university admissions interview, this could be a job interview, this could be going on a date. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves to impress that other person, to make them want us. But in all three of those instances, it is a two-way street. You have to want them as well. And it's not a foregone conclusion that the person that's interviewing you, that you're going to want what they're offering. And again, whether it's a date, a job, or a university. So this is a chance. You just want to remember, yeah, I really would like to go to this university, but I don't have to choose that university. Again, there's 5,000 options in the US. And so I have some power in this too. That university wants me to want to go there. And so, if you can kind of keep that in mind, it's not just me wanting them, they want me as well. That's going to make you feel like you have a bit more agency and a bit more power, which you do have. And I think that leads into, don't pretend that you're someone you're not. And I think we all do this, especially, when you're teenagers, you feel a bit uncertain. So it's very easy to go in. Again, you want to impress them. And so you kind of I'm going to create an image of myself that I think they want. The problem with that is, in many cases, you're going to create a bad fit. Because if you're pretending someone that you're not, and then the university then chooses you based off of your interview, where you kind of portrayed an image of yourself that isn't really who you are, you've now set yourself up to fail. Because now when you get to that campus, you are going to find out, hey, I said I was this particular way. Maybe I love math. This is this is an example, but a math heavy university. I kept talking about how much I love math because I thought that's what they wanted to hear. They selected me based on that. Now I'm on this campus and I hate math and I have so much math expectation. You've done yourself a disservice. And I know a lot of times, especially when you're looking at university rankings and things like that, or your dream school, there is that temptation to I want them to want me. But remember, you have power. There's 5,000 universities. You should be applying to more than one university. So you don't need any university. I don't care if it is your dream school. You don't need them to accept you. You are going to have options. And this happened to me. I applied to my dream, several universities. I applied to about 8. There's one I really wanted to get into because it had high rankings. And I didn't get into that university. And to be honest with you, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I love my second choice. And I would have never chosen anywhere else if I had known what I knew then. So, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to impress. You don't have to. The university needs to impress you as well. And that's the third point. Use the interviews to see if you like the university. It is not just about the university liking you and accepting you. It is also about you liking that university and accepting that university. You can choose a different university if you don't feel like you're treated well. You can choose a different university if you feel like it's not going to be a fit or if the culture doesn't seem like something you're looking for. So you have a lot of power in this process. I don't want you to ever think, I have to impress this school. My life depends on this. It doesn't. You have a lot of power. There are a lot of options. None of this, and I understand this is easy for me to say because I've already finished university, none of this is life or death. I remember when I was in your position, it really felt like if I don't get into my dream school, my life is over. I can guarantee you that is not the case. So, it's really important to keep that in mind. You have power, you have agency. And I think, kind of going back to universities want you as much as you want them, just to give you an idea of kind of how the process works from the admissions end. Every admissions officer has a certain number of students they have to recruit every year. So they might say, well, your territory is Eastern Europe. We need you to recruit 50 students from Eastern Europe this year. So as an admissions officer, nothing would make me happier if the first 50 students I interviewed did excellent and came to the university. Because what does that mean? It means I have less work. It means you all made my job really, really easy. And so I think also when we're going through this process, we can think that universities are looking for reasons to deny us. I promise you that's not the case. Every admissions officer wants you to be successful because if you come in an interview and you do a great interview and you have a great application, you've just made their life very, very easy because they can say, hey, this student was great. I'm looking for reasons to say why they're great because if they are great and I can accept them, that's fewer students I have to go through. We all want to do less work. Just being honest, I'm not trying to, say anything bad about admissions officers. It's human nature. We want to do less work. So they're looking for you to have a good interview. They're looking to accept you. They don't want you to come in and have a terrible interview. So I think it's really important to kind of know all those different aspects of the admissions process and kind of how it works. So now getting into some steps that you can take. I think before the interview, this is one of the steps that students don't do a fantastic job at, and that is a lot of preparation. And you hear practice, you hear a lot, you should practice interviews, and I think students kind of do it half-heartedly. But I really think it is important to practice, and practice some more. And so you can ask, EducationUSA, hey, can you do some practice interview questions with me? Your teachers, your parents, your friends. I think it's really important to practice. Google, hey, what are questions I might get during a university interview, and work on that. And what I used to do was I would kind of give myself practice questions. So I would ask myself, hey, in the interview, if I'm going to be asked this question, how would I respond? And the reason you want to practice is it's very much like writing a paper. The first paper you write, it's okay, but you need to go in and edit. And when you edit it, it gets a little bit better. And then you have someone else look at it and they'll create some edits. And then that gets a little better. It's the same thing with an interview. Your first answer that you think of might be okay, but if you're doing that practice with a guidance counselor, that guidance counselor might say, hey, here are some little things you can say that would make that a better answer. Now you've edited it to be a little bit better. And again, you can do that with yourself. You can run through questions with yourself, practice answers. You'll start to notice, boy, I really struggle with a certain type of question, or this answer was okay, but the second time I thought of it, I thought of a better answer. So I think that's really, really, really important. Students don't do that. If you've practiced also, you're just going to feel more confident in the process. I think the other thing, and students definitely don't do this very well, that's to research the university and the major. You really, really want to do that, because it's just like if you're going to get your student visa interview, you want to be very specific. And students tend to not be very specific in interviews. So you might get a simple question like, why do you want to come to this university? And most students are going to answer something like, well, I want to get a really good education. That is very, very generic. That could be applied to every university. And I think it's also obvious if you're applying to a university, you want to get a good education. So I would say that's probably not a good answer because it's too general. A better answer would be to say, well, you know what? I'm really interested in Nova Southeastern University because, and you all don't know this yet, but because I'm really interested in marine wildlife. I know NSU has one of the highest ranked marine biology programs in the state of Florida. I'm particularly interested in coral reef research, and I know your oceanographic center is right on the ocean, and your graduate students do work with coral reef preservation. And so I eventually want to go on to get my master's degree with your master's in science program because you specialize in what I'm interested in. I think that would be a much better answer because you're specific. It's shown that you know what you want to do. And you don't have to know what you want to do, but if you do know, you should be putting that out there. And it shows you've researched the university and your major in particular. So, you definitely want to be very specific, show you've looked in. And going back to the last slide, that demonstrates interest. If you can be specific about why you're interested in your university, why you've chosen your major, you've shown you've done research and that you're actually genuinely very interested. And then the third thing is just know why you want to attend. That goes back to the step before. You want to research the university. You want to be very specific. Again, I think some examples of knowing why you want to attend. Well, I'll use my personal example. When I was looking at graduate school, it was in archaeology, which is the study of old humans. And I would say I got admitted to the program, but I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know why I wanted to attend that university. And it ended up going poorly for me because I knew I wanted to study the archaeology in the Caribbean. The university I applied to was very highly ranked, which is why I chose it. I was accepted and I attended there. But then guess what? They didn't focus on the type of archaeology in the Caribbean that I wanted to do. So I didn't do my research. I messed up. I didn't research. I didn't go and check. I could have easily gone to their website, looked at their professors. What interest do their professors have? Do any of them do what I want to do? And that's available on every university website. You can go to their website, look at their professors, look at their majors, see what courses you'd be taking if you choose that major, see where their professors went to university, see what their professors specialize in. That's a great way for you to see if that's a good fit, but also to do really well in your interview. Because if you can say, well, hey, interested in, marine coral reef preservation, and I see you have this professor, you name their name, they do that research, that's really gonna reflect very, very positively on you. So preparation, I think that's the key to this slide. Just make sure you're preparing. If you think you're prepared, prepare a little bit more. You really can't go wrong. And then, of course, that will lead us into the interview. So obviously the first step, maybe it's not that obvious, but be presentable. That can be a little bit tricky to know what is presentable. And I think obviously there's different standards for if you're on Zoom versus if you're in person. Every university is going to have a different standard of what is presentable. And so my recommendation with an interview is, especially if it's in person, ask your admissions officer, what is the acceptable dress code for this interview? I think that's the best way to go. I also think it's always good advice to dress up a little bit more than you think you need. I'm a very casual person. As you can see, I just have a polo on. But I think if you're going for an interview, I would recommend going up a step. I mean, even if you wear a suit, you might be as a guy, you might be overdressed, but you're not going to go wrong. No one in that admissions office is going to say, this guy wore a suit. They're going to think the student's really interested. They're really taking this seriously. But ask your admissions officer what's acceptable dress. It might sound crazy, but sometimes students will show up with t-shirts and stains on them and stuff like that. So those are honestly usually more students from the US are that way. We're a little bit more casual, but you don't want to do that. You definitely want to be presentable. I think the next step is project confidence. And that really, honestly, projecting confidence goes back to everything you do before the interview. It's just like if any of you are athletes, if you're practicing hard, you're going to play with confidence. It's the same concept. If you're practicing your interview and you feel like you've run through questions and you feel really good about the answers that you've come up with, you've done your research on the university, you're going to go in confident. You're going to go in knowing I'm prepared for this. Even if it doesn't go well, I've done everything I can, and you'll come across more confident. I think that's the key. With that too, you're going to want to look at your body language. That's a little more difficult on Zoom, obviously, but you don't want to slouch. You want to make sure if you're in person, you're looking at your admissions officer in the eye, shaking their hand when you show up and when you leave. But you just be aware of your body language. Be aware, if you're on Zoom, the advantage of that is you can kind of see yourself. So you can see if you're doing anything that's making you look shy or unconfident. Because again, that goes back to maturity. So you really definitely want to do your preparation so that when you're in there, you're coming across as, I feel good with myself. I'm comfortable in my own skin. I'm ready for these answers. I'm ready for the college experience. Confidence is really going to show them you're mature and you're ready for the college experience. I think a part of that is to be conversational in the interview as well. Many times when you're interviewing students, they're very shy. And so students will tend to sit and it's like an interrogation. So the student won't say anything unless the admissions officer is asking a question, and then they respond and wait for the admissions officer. I think it's okay for you to be a little bit more conversational, a little bit more relaxed, because that's going to show you're confident. I know there's always kind of the idea of you do the interview, and then at the end, the university will say, do you have any questions for us? And that's when you ask those questions. Now, that's perfectly fine. But if you do have questions, which you should come prepared with questions that you have, and that's what you do in your preparation phase beforehand. But you should go into your interview with a list of questions that you can't find on the website. Make sure that's key. Make sure you Google it first, because if it's the first thing that pops up and the answer is there, that's probably not a good question. Make sure you've done your research. I have some questions. I can't find those answers on Google. I'm going to make sure I ask those during the interview, but you don't have to wait till the end. I think if you're during the interview, the admissions officer is asking you questions, and just naturally the topic that you have a question about comes up, bring that up at that point. You don't have to wait to the end. That's going to make you seem, you want the admissions officer to feel like I'm having a conversation with an adult here. And I think that'll help you do that. If you're just conversational, a little bit more relaxed, maybe say a joke here or there, you make sure you're smiling, things like that. The admissions officer should be trying to make you feel comfortable and at ease, but you should be doing the same thing. I think that's really makes the interview go better and show that you're ready for college. And then this last thing, this doesn't sound like it's a big deal, but you'd be surprised maybe how many students don't do this, but you really want to focus on your positives. I think what happens is we don't like bragging about ourselves. We think, well, if I'm talking about how great I am, that comes across as I'm arrogant or I'm bragging. But there are ways to focus on your positives that aren't arrogance and that aren't bragging. Part of that is going to come from the practice. You're doing practice, and you might answer a practice question where you think, oh no, that sounded like I was bragging. I'm going to change the phrasing of that. That's the practice stage of it. But you definitely want to focus on your positives. A lot of times students, they want to seem humble. They don't want to come across as bragging. So accidentally, they focus on their negatives. This happens a lot. You'd be surprised. Or students will start to say, well, I'm not really good at math, or I don't like to do this, and I'm not good at that. And the interview kind of gets away from them. So you definitely want to try to avoid that. I mean, you want to think about it. In an interview, you're selling yourself. Now, you think if you're a salesperson and you're selling a cell phone, and the cell phone has a great camera, but it has a terrible memory. When you're going to sell the cell phone, you're not going to say, the memory's terrible. You're going to say, hey, look how great this camera is. Let me show you how great the camera is. You're going to focus on the positive. It's the same thing. If you're selling yourself, you want to focus on your positives. It's okay if you have negatives. It's okay if you have things that you don't like, but you want to frame them in such a way that it doesn't become the focal point of the interview. Because again, that kind of shows, going back up, that shows you're not projecting confidence. If you're just really focusing on negatives, you're not coming across as confident. If you're not coming across as confident, that doesn't seem mature. If you don't seem mature, it seems like you might not be ready for college. So you can kind of see how those different aspects snowball. So none of those things I think are probably new to you, but I think it's really important you think about them. And I think, think about these different steps beforehand. This is all part of your preparation phase. What are you going to What are you going to wear? What positives do I want to focus on? What are my negatives? And how do I make sure that I'm not going to go, if my negatives come up, then I'm not going too far down that rabbit hole. You kind of want to say your negative and move on quickly. It's all part of the preparation, but these are some ways that you can kind of make the interview go well. I think the key theme with this is, I think all of them goes back to confidence. I think if you're presentable, you're projecting confidence, you're conversational and focusing on positives, that's showing a confident student who's ready for university. And then the final part of this, of course, is after the interview. And this is another step where students, I don't want to say they don't do a good job of it, but I don't think they maybe go as far as they should. So you definitely want to make sure you thank your interviewers. If you're in person during the interview, of course, that means you're going to shake their hand, look them in the eye. If you're on Zoom, you're not going to be able to do that, but make sure that you're thanking the admissions officer for their time, for taking time out to interview you, for the conversation. I think that's really important. And what I recommend to students is afterwards, like let's say later that same day, if you have a morning interview, later in the afternoon or the evening, send a follow-up email to your admissions officer and just say, hey, I really wanted to tell you I enjoyed my interview today. I thank you again for taking out time. If you have further questions about my qualifications, please let me know, because that's going to, again, show them that you're appreciative of their time. Again, there's lots and lots, thousands of students that admissions officers are dealing with. So if they're taking time out to interview you, that means that's something else they aren't able to do. So you should show appreciation for that. And I think by sending a follow-up email, you're reiterating that you're appreciative, but also by saying in that email, if there's anything else that you need for my qualifications, I'm happy to provide that. It's really, again, showing I enjoyed the interview and I'm still interested. And I think that's, again, important to show the university, hey, I'm still interested. I'm available. It shows maturity. I'm engaged with this process. And then I think the other thing you want to do is do a follow-up. Again, universities are busy. So if you get an interview, you're probably not going to get an admissions decision the next day. It might take a few days, if not a few weeks. But I think it's totally appropriate and okay to follow up with them. So I think a good amount of time for follow-ups is like, you have your interview in the morning, let's say. You thank them at the time. You're going to send them a follow-up email that evening, just saying, thank you again for your time. If you have further questions, let me know. And then what I would say is if you haven't gotten emails from them, if you haven't gotten a WhatsApp, if you don't see any changes in your application status, maybe a week later, I might send another follow-up email to your admissions officer and just say, hey, I'm really excited about attending this university. I just wanted to send you another follow-up to see if you needed anything else from me for my admissions decision. Something like that. You don't want to nag them. You don't want to be sending every 2 or 3 days, what's my decision, because that starts to get too much. But you also want to show that you're engaged in the process. So that's a fine line, of course. It's a fine line between, am I nagging this person or am I truly, showing my interest? But I think, a follow-up email to see if you need anything else from me. That's going to show you're still anything else from me. That's going to show you're still interested. That's going to show that maturity. And they'll let you know, they'll let you know, hey, you know what? Thank you for reaching out. We actually do need this additional document from you. Or they might say, hey, you know what? We're still in the process. There's a line of students ahead of you, but we will get to you. If there's anything else at that time, we'll let you know. So I think that's entirely appropriate. That's how I recommend students kind of go about the follow-up process. So I know you probably have a lot of questions, and it doesn't just have to be about interviews. Again, I have my email up here. I'll go back to the slide with the QR code if any of you want to grab that. But if any of you have your questions, so I think I lost connection there for a second, but I think I'm back. So here's the QR code if any of you wanted to grab that to get more information about the university. And then again, with my email, if you have questions about interviews or you have an upcoming interview, even though it's not with NSU and you would like some help, feel free to reach out to me. I will reply to you.
Kind of you to let our students opportunity to reach out to you. We really appreciate this, and thank you for such an amazing presentation. Personally, I was listening to you. Oh, my mic. I hope my mic is working. No, it isn't.
We can hear you. There's like a buzzing sound or something.
Okay, but you can hear me, right?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Maybe not very well. Okay, I will try to put my laptop closer to me, and maybe it will help somehow. So I just wanted to say that the presentation was really useful, and I have gained a lot of insights, and the most valuable was like interview is a two-sided road. When not only student is evaluated, but student is also has an opportunity to evaluate the institution they are applying for. So I really like that advice, and I really like that you recommended, to check the university during the interview as well as you are checked actually. And guys, if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat. I think that we have a few minutes to answer your questions, so don't miss this opportunity. And I have my personal question. Have you had an experience of being an interviewer, and maybe you can name a few common mistakes that students usually make when they go to the interview?
Yeah, I think from my experience, common mistakes that I've run into is, I think the first thing, and again, I think this might be a US thing, but students oftentimes show up underdressed. And like, I'm really casual. I would wear t-shirts and jeans everywhere if it was up to me. But still, sometimes students come in with like stains on their shirts and stuff like that. Like, that just kind of shows you're not serious. And I suspect probably with international students, this probably wouldn't be an issue. I think the other things I've noticed very commonly with students is they don't do their own research. The whole first part of it about making sure you've researched the university. Students tend not to do that. And so many questions that students have or things they brought up would have just been found with a Google search. And I think it's really, really important that students, if you have, like I said, make sure if you have an interview, you go with questions. But any question you have, Google it before you go in, because you don't want to embarrass yourself. Because if you go in with a question that is like, we're always, all of us, every single person here is afraid of asking a stupid question. Now, there are no stupid questions, but there are questions you could have easily found your own answer to. I mean, I'll give you an example. I had a student who said, "What's the address of the university?" Now, that's not a stupid question, but it kind of is, because you could have just Googled, you could have gone on the website, you could have just gone to Google Maps. Like there are all kinds of ways to do that. So, those are the kind of things you want to make sure that you're doing some research ahead of time. And then I think the other thing is the confidence part. That's the big, students come across, and I do sort of think, you all would probably be doing interviews through Zoom. I think you're at an advantage because it's much harder to see body language. Whereas if you're doing the in-person interview, like so many students are like slouched down in their chairs, even the way like they'll hold their hands like this. And that's really not welcoming. That really shows like I'm scared, I'm not confident. And even in the way they respond to you is like very quiet voice and with their eyes down. And I would never deny a student from that, because I understand like some of us are shy, but some universities are more strict, and it might say, well, this student really doesn't seem ready. They can't even look me in the eye, or they can't project their voice. So I think those are things you really want to be aware of. But every one of those aspects, you can make sure you're okay as long as you're preparing. If you've done your research on the university, if you practiced your interviews to where you feel comfortable, if you've prepared ahead of time, what are you going to wear? What looks appropriate? Tried it on, gotten feedback from your family and friends, you'll be fine.
Thank you for sharing your advice, and I really agree with them. And sometimes I even allow myself with students. I have been working for a long time to joke something like, "Let me Google it for you." I just really want to be sure that they have this skill of Googling, because it's really helpful. So I can totally relate what you have been talking about. And maybe so. We have already talked about the common mistakes, but let's talk about the opposite, topic. Maybe there was an outstanding, really powerful, amazing interview, and question is, what made it stand out?
That's a great question. I have not been asked that, and now you're giving me a good interview question, because I have to think about it. I think what makes students stand out to me are ones who can open up and show their personalities. And so, all of our personalities aren't going to match, but even if I do an interview where it's like, I wouldn't want to be friends with this student, but if they can show their aspects of their personality and show little bits about them, like you feel an affinity to that student, you feel like I get to know them a little bit. So I think for me, the best interviews are ones where students can really, just show who they are, and just be relaxed. And there's interviews where I'll walk out and I think, well, I really enjoyed talking to that student and their family. Oftentimes it's with their family. And I couldn't necessarily say there's one thing that student did that made them stand out, but it is just opening up, showing some vulnerability, showing a bit of yourself, feeling comfortable. I think part of the, the aspect I said about be conversational, I think that's a lot of it. Is the students who really stand out are ones where you, as an interviewer, you walk out feeling like it wasn't an interview, but that you just had a conversation with the student. And I think that's really it, and this, I don't really have any tips to make it conversational. I think, doing the preparation and just feeling like you're comfortable and you're confident. And sometimes you have to trick yourself. Like, I know going into an interview is scary, and it can, you get nervous, and if you get nervous, then it can come across in the interview. So I would, look for tricks to kind of calm yourself down. There's all kinds of breathing exercises. I had to do, I speak Spanish, but I had to do a radio interview in Spanish in a different country. And I was extremely nervous about it because it's still my second language. And the whole time I was sweating, and I just did breathing exercises because I could feel my heart rate getting faster and faster and faster and faster. And I was like, you're going to pass out because you're so nervous about this. So I just did breathing exercises and I can calm down. And the other thing I used to do, and I know this sounds silly, but it really helped me a lot, was I would kind of give myself a pep talk before interviews. So I remember before I used to go to admissions interviews, I would put my favorite music on to kind of get pumped up. And I would just tell myself you're the best. Like, no one can do this interview better than you. There's nothing they can tell you. There's nothing that they can ask you that you're not going to be able to answer. Like, you're crazy to be nervous about this. You are the student that they want. And like, I would just give myself this pep talk. I know it sounds silly, but then when I went into the interview, I really kind of like, a part of me had convinced myself that like, hey, that's true. I just listened to this music that's got me pumped up. I pumped myself up. Like, I'm good to go in this interview. There's nothing they can do that can hurt me. And that really is the case. I mean, like I said, it's not just them. Like, don't go into an interview thinking they have to choose me. You know, you have to choose them too. Like, it's 50-50. You know, the university's just as afraid that you're going to say, hey, I didn't have a good experience with your, like, universities spend tens of thousands of dollars to make sure you have a good experience when you go to campus so that you look good. So as much as you're trying to impress the university, they're trying to impress you. So, you know, I think that's the other aspect of it too. If you go in realizing like, we think the university has all the power. Not true. You have 50% of the power. If you can just convince yourself, hey, I don't have to choose you. If I don't have a good experience, if you don't treat me well, if I don't like it, there's 4,999 other universities in the US that I can go to. If you can convince yourself of that, I really think, I mean, you don't want to act like a jerk about it and say that to them, but you can kind of convince yourself like, hey, I've got power here. I don't need to be so stressed about this.
Thank you for sharing your tips, and thank you for sharing some, examples of your personal experience and some coping mechanism. Yeah, you can use to reduce the level of stress before interview. I think that those tips can be really open, eye open. So I really thank you, Mike. Okay, I think that's it. We are going to finish our lecture. I'm really grateful for you, Mike. I really enjoyed listening to your presentation, listening to your advice, and we really appreciate you being with us today. So thank you for the presentation, and thank you everyone who has joined us and who has spent this evening with us. Have a great, peaceful evening, and remember that Education USA is always here for you. So if you do need any help with your application, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Take care.